What is up, everybody? Welcome to What is Feedback Fridays, as well as a topic that we're going to be covering, which I've already written in the description here in the title, How to Hire Employees for Small Business for Lead Generation and Beyond. This is what we're going to be covering some of, but we're also going to be going through the traditional format that you are used to in terms of questions. So we will be answering questions that are live and answering some of the questions that we've gotten. We just didn't get very many. And I guess that's just because a lot of the content we put out was Brad and it was Chris, and they did just such a good job that, I mean, who has questions after these guys are speaking, teaching, and training on topics? So with that, both of them are here. How are you guys doing on this Friday? Which I didn't even realize it was a Friday, by the way. I was like, whoa, it's Feedback Fridays.
That's always good. It's always the worst if it's the opposite, where it's like Thursday or Wednesday and you're like, you feel like it's a Friday. But I'm feeling great, man. Went to the gym for the first time this week. Getting back at it. So feeling good. And I think we got a good topic for today, because we got some awesome stuff on the back end of that we'll be rolling out for you guys. And, stay tuned. Chris, how you feeling?
Feeling all right, man. Wish I would have got a little bit more sleep, but hey, that's the life of a new parent. So
Dude, yeah.
And it's not the fault of my daughter, it's more so the fault. So for any of people who are watching are not parents and are going to be parents soon, or I would say the pro tip is sleep when your baby sleeps.
Everybody says that.
Sleep when your baby sleeps.
Everybody.
Otherwise,
we all feel it,
the moment you go to lay down is the moment they wake up and you're like, oh. Even though she slept 6 hours, so it's my fault for not sleeping during that 6-hour window and choosing to wait until 3:30 in the morning when she wakes up to actually try to fall asleep. And then, yeah.
Right. But now, guys, everybody, we're going to get into the topic at hand really, really soon. But just one thing to underscore on what you said, Chris, is that is something that you'll learn within the first 3 weeks. It sounds like you've taken a little bit longer to finally learn that, because how old is Coda now?
4.5, almost 5 months.
You're a little late on the game to figure that out.
Yeah, but see, I'm blessed in the fact that my wife, doesn't work, and so she stays home and takes care of the baby. And I'm a night owl, and she is early to bed. So what'll happen is she'll go to bed early, and even if Coda is awake, I'll stay downstairs with Coda and keep her up and excited until like 1 o'clock when I'm ready to go to bed, and then I'll feed her, so that when she goes, when I go upstairs to go to bed, she's like pumped full of milk and ready to pass out for the next 6 hours. And then Tori can wake up early when Coda wakes up, and then we're all good. But it's there's some adjustments for sure.
Yeah, I feel
Learning curve.
It is. Yeah. So every single one of us have young kids under 2 years old. So we definitely feel the lack of sleep, but that doesn't stop us. In fact, as a night owl that Chris is, he's up closing his deals. That's when Chris closes your deals. That's when he does it. He gets all that stuff handled in his owl time when he's in the middle of the night. But speaking of which, the rest of the stuff during the day, what does he do? He outsources it to employees for the most part. While he also works too, because for some reason he's a machine. But here's the deal. If you want to live a lifestyle by design, which is something that sounds more like a cliche, but is actually more tangible and true when it comes to hiring people, then you're definitely going to want to stick around, because knowing how to hire employees for a small business the right way is super critical. And that's whether it's for lead generation or admin work, an executive assistant and beyond. And that's regardless of the industry. So as such, for us as real estate investors, we're going to be discussing some principles that are definitely going to resonate with any industry, so that you'll be confident on how to hire the right people for your business. So that's why we're going to answer the questions such as, what's the first hire I ever made in my business? Talking about me parlaying that over to Chris to talk about that too, as well as get some insight from Brad, because he has been an entrepreneur even before he got into the real estate space. So there's definitely a lot of insight that you're able to glean from this. If you're in a position where either A, you're just starting out and you're thinking about hiring somebody, I want to say first off, congratulations, because your mindset is exactly where it should be. If you're already considering hiring somebody, especially if you're trying to figure out how can I hire somebody, even though I have a limited budget. It's critical because you're actually going to work less and profit more, even though you're going to be spending money hiring somebody. But that's why we wanted to give you a little bit of insight on hiring correctly. And this is outside of the course that we're currently compiling right now, the way that we did it ourselves, which will be free, and it will be a playlist on its own in YouTube here on our channel. So just a little sneak peek of what's coming. And I would love to keep this open. So again, if you have questions, please keep them or put them in the chat, because we're monitoring that right now. Right? Anything you guys wanted to say as an intro before we kind of dive into what I'll provide as an overview? This is a back and forth.
For me, man, I'm ready to get into it. I think you covered it.
Awesome. Chris, did you say something at the same time as Brad?
We did. And I think we were both thinking the same thing. Nope.
Yeah.
You nailed
You've
it.
done such a good job. Yeah.
You nailed it. Why am I here?
Mm-hmm.
Why am I here? You're always needed. That's why all three of us were the tripod of business partnerships, which is another discussion for another day, talking about how to partner, why to partner, scaling your internal team, and aligning yourself with other people who are like-minded, not just as employees, but as actual partners. So for this instance, what we're going to talk about, I covered, and I'll just start with understanding why it's important to first identify what your need is in general. So if what we recommend is an executive assistant, right? Especially if you're just in business for either yourself, just a solopreneur, even if you have a business partner. But we have two executive assistants, and I don't know what we would do if we actually didn't have them in our business right now. I frankly have no idea what we would be doing with ourselves. But identifying the need in your business, whether it's an executive assistant or not, is the first step. But there's something to that you have to understand. Identifying the need doesn't just mean like, okay, what are the departments of my business and all that? No, you first have to understand what you are really good at, what you don't like doing, and what you can at least tolerate doing over the course of whatever your goal is to get that position filled. Because success in real estate, let's bring this back to real estate for a second, and frankly, in other businesses that do sales, looks like this. There's 4 key roles. So as the niche of real estate, we look at hiring an EA first, that's then going to hire the other 3 keys. That's somebody who's going to be on the phone, who's going to either do cold calling, phone sales for your business if it's outside of the real estate investment business. And then why everybody is moving to text marketing, regarding somebody else that needs to get hired, it has got to be someone for SMS sales, where you're the one sending them, or a system is automatically sending them, and then you have a staff that, and I'm fully aware of the fact that there are AI integrations with some text message marketing platforms that allow you to make that process easier. But until we reach the singularity and Skynet is taking over, you still have to have somebody there to manage those responses appropriately. And then also the phone sales. I get it. We have the what's called Google Assistant that came out several years ago that can make dinner reservations for you, but you still need somebody on the phone. Now you may be thinking, dang, I don't have a big budget for any of this stuff. We're going to get into how it actually costs you a whole lot less than you really think it will. So stay tuned for that. But you also have to understand from the very beginning that when you're creating a job post for any of the positions that you're creating, there's a couple key points that you need to know before you even put ink to paper, so to speak, right? We're probably going to be doing this on the internet, so you're going to type it out. But the first thing is, kind of back to the first opener we talked about, determining the exact job responsibilities of that job you identify. So you identify the actual job. Let's just talk about it from a cold caller's perspective, determine the exact job responsibilities. It's easy to say that those job responsibilities are going to be using whatever platform you're using and then making calls and just seeing if they're interested in selling their property as a real estate investor, or seeing if they're interested in a product or service that you're providing, whether your industry is in some other type of sales. But there's more to it than that. And something that's really important to also identify is what metrics you're going to be tracking to see what success looks like. Rewind the tape, because all of those things should be determined by you first. So in order to create a successful employee, you first have to have a successful system. You're not going to be able to really spur that employee up into growth within your company unless you already know what that path looks like. So you also want to outline what that next step is for them. Say a cold caller, for instance, where are you hiring them to just be a one-off person and you're not going to scale your business at all? Or do you think maybe a year from now or possibly sooner, I'm going to want to scale this as a department in my business? In the sales department, a sub-department is the phone sales. I think the answer should be yes. And I think if you're thinking, yeah, I definitely think yes too, then you're on the right track to business scale and business growth. So that's something else. And know first and foremost what the acceptable pay range is, to pay these individuals. And we'll get into a quick overview of pay versus US based and not US based, because a lot of employers are going online to hire virtual assistants in the United States, in Canada, as well as Australia and the UK. And they're hiring in places like Pakistan, India, which really, it's very close in terms of communication and culture, ostensibly. And then also the Philippines and even Nigeria and several other places in Africa. And we've hired people from every place I mentioned and beyond. So one thing about that is you need to understand there's going to be some cultural differences, and that's definitely a good thing, right? Understanding their culture, and then just knowing that the way that they communicate to benefit the conversation, you want to get accustomed to that. We start hiring people from the Philippines, and that's one thing that we've discovered is the best route to take. So just as a little sub point to this, in terms of knowing the acceptable pay range, there's also culture involved in this too. The pay is going to vary no matter where it is that you're hiring them from, where they're identified. But of course, we want to talk about understanding the time that's involved too. So knowing how long each task takes. We didn't have a lot of solid metrics for cold callers in our real estate investing business when we first got started, because we weren't doing it even when we had been in business for a long time. We just didn't do that because we had outsourced it to another company that did cold calling. What they didn't do was track and report on the metrics that we really wanted to see. And of course, we can get into those metrics and stuff, that what you should track, but I'd rather stick to the greater conversation pertaining to how to hire somebody and give a high level overview. In other trainings and other videos that we'll post, we'll get into the specifics of what KPIs to track with each individual role. We actually have all of this stuff lined out on paper, ready to hit record, and it's all going to be available coming for free on the YouTube channel as well in individual playlists. But just know that when it comes to understanding how long it takes, a lot of this is going to be dependent upon you. And why is that? Well, for all of these things that you would hire for, no matter what role it is, you probably want to fill that role first to determine and know not only how to train somebody else, but just to understand what is actually involved in it. If you're doing it at a high level and you're a type A type personality where you're like, man, I want the control over this and I don't want to let it go, you're the perfect candidate for that paradigm shift that says you are going to have somebody that comes on who, of course, might not do it as good as you, but you don't need somebody to do it as good as you. You need somebody to do it 70 to 80% as good as you so that you can then focus on building another part of your business. In other words, working on your business instead of in your business. Because if all you do is work in your business, then that is all you're ever going to do. You're never going to scale. And you would have just created a business for yourself that doesn't scale, which is basically a job. And I hate to put it this way, but this is the only way to put it so that it resonates with somebody that might be watching this video that will just really hopefully light a fire under them. Your business owns you. You don't own your business if you're never working on it, or if you have come to the place in your business where you're working 80 hours a week, right? Just think about your why. Again, we won't get into the why too much because that's for another maybe motivational, very important yet more of a motivational conversation. Getting back to the why the heck you got in the business in the first place. And I guarantee you the why has nothing to do with, you know what, I just want to be a slave to my business and work 80, 90 hours a week and never spend time with my friends. And if you have a family, your family. And I never want to take a day off. That's probably not why you got into the business in the first place. I'm just going to take a wild guess. So with that, you got to understand how long it takes, whatever the task is. And also, we talked about the metrics. You need to know the metrics that you want to track. And then you want to set a clear path for growth in the position. We mentioned that for job opportunities that will eventually open up as a manager from somebody who's just a cold caller, and set whatever makes sense for your business, particular positions, name them whatever you want. We've named phone sales just as an example instead of cold caller, right? Because sometimes it's warm calls, sometimes it's cold calls, but at the end of the day, even in the real estate space, as much as I hate to say I'm not a salesperson, I've never been a salesperson, I have been, especially when I personally was doing this business by myself and I was talking to sellers on the phone. They're sellers, but they have something to sell. I'm actually a salesperson, even though I'm looking to buy, because you got to sell the opportunity that you have, right? So, I can couch it in, it's not sales, I'm buying, this isn't a sales pitch, but it is. So obviously, in addition to those things, you want to define benchmarks for raises. So you want to know all right, well, if I'm going to start hiring somebody, let's say, for example, from the Philippines, in the beginning, a phone sales associate is going to be somebody who is going to get paid with no experience to a lot of experience, a range between $3 to $5 an hour USD. Well, if they start at $3, what skill sets, what benchmarks do they need to hit, right? Skill sets to continue to develop and refine, and benchmarks do they need to hit based off KPIs and metrics to get $4 and $5? And do managers get $6? Right? So we want to understand that going in. And I'm talking about this before even writing the job description. Do you have to have all these things detailed out in depth? No, you may not necessarily even have the answer to any of that stuff. But what you do want to have happen is at least brainstorm and have an idea of that. And I share all this, by the way. Let me just take a quick pause to tell you the why behind all of this, because this is absolutely critical. Because most investors who have had experience, and even business owners of every kind, hiring somebody, the employees don't stick around. And the reason is several, but one of them is they don't do this. They don't do this part. It's what Chris always used to say this. It's unmet, unspoken expectations. Because what you're doing is you're defining expectations for what you see, right? What you expect. And then you cannot communicate any of that with anyone you would hire if you didn't already think about these things first. So that's something to consider as you continue to put ink to paper, right? So before you do, consider all these things and then start outlining what that job looks like. There's some other things to talk about, like defining your company culture, distinguishing your unique value proposition, creating incentives and rewards and stuff like that. But before we move on to those things, is there anything you guys wanted to add? Chris, Brad?
I would say if I were brand new, or even if I wasn't, but I hadn't scaled yet, I'm a solopreneur. I've been doing this for a couple months. Maybe I got a deal or two under my belt, and I'm hearing you talk, Christian. I'm like, this all sounds really good. I don't know how to scale, and I need to get out of the business because really my why is not just financial freedom. It's financial freedom so that I can spend more time with my family, which means I need to not work as much. So I need somebody to fill the roles, the for lack of a better term, the low dollar value activities in my business, so that I can focus on the high dollar value generating activities like closing motivated sellers, like working on the business and creating a plan and structuring everything so that I can get more people into those spots. But I think the question that I would have in my mind is, where would I even find these people? What's the best place to find the people, Christian?
That's one thing to consider. I think also in addition to that, right, is like, if you don't have systems and processes in place that you've created and dialed in, then you're not bringing on an employee. You're bringing on a partner without the expectations of what a partner is, or the salary or the pay or the benefits that a partner gets, right? You're putting somebody in a role expecting them to build out systems, processes, and procedures, as an employee. And that just doesn't align, and that's going to create friction, and you're going to lose people that way. You're not going to create an environment where they feel empowered to do what they need to do and grow in their role. Before we jump into like where we find those people, I think one thing that's really important for, those business owners who are like, man, I'm not sure if I have to, if I can hire somebody, what role to hire, what they're going to do, all these different things, right? The first step, if you don't have a system or process in place, is starting to map that out. But look at your calendar, in the coming weeks, but in the past weeks, and identify like, what are the things you've done every single day, and like document all of those things, every little thing that you do, so what you can outsource. And then really think through, okay, is this a revenue generating activity, or is this a minimum wage activity and just a task? And the thought process that I really like to implement, when I'm trying to determine, whether these are things that I can outsource is one, is it something that requires is it a skill position, right? Like if you play football, right? Football, there's skill positions. You got wide receivers, you got quarterbacks, you've got like every position obviously requires a skill, but they define skill positions, like those the glory positions essentially, right? So closer, that's a skill position, right? Underwriting, as much as there's some tasks, there's an art to it. It's a skill position, right? So just identifying those things and saying, okay, is this something that I can outsource with minimal training? And then go through the thought process of, is it something I can outsource with technology, or does it require a human being? If I can outsource it with technology, it's probably going to save me money and be way more efficient. If I can't outsource it with technology, then it's a matter of, okay, can I offshore this role, or does it have to be somebody domestic? Right? Because again, if you can offshore the role, then you're going to reduce your costs, and it's going to make things a lot easier and manageable as you're scaling your business. And then lastly, if it requires somebody who is domestic, then go to the point of, okay, is it a skill position that requires, intensive training, or is it a task-based position that I could train somebody really quickly, right? And when you identify those and map those out, it's going to put you in a better position to fill those roles and develop your team out.
Yeah, really good points. And I do have a recommendation for where to find, and I also have a recommendation to, if it's something that you're not outsourcing, leveraging technology, how to make all of the previous things that I had mentioned a lot easier. I've already linked them in the description. Actually, I did that while Chris was sharing his thoughts on this. And the first place is the best place to find VAs, linked in the description below. And then also something that's called Descript, it's linked below as the best screen recording training or tool. Transcription. It also transcribes, but the free version is basically Loom. Many of you have probably heard about Loom, but Loom's paid version is equivalent to Descript's free version. So no 5-minute cap. Their real main selling point is transcriptions, which is really critical when it comes to like instructional design and course creation and content. So if you're somebody out there who's an influencer as well, no matter what your niche is, if you're in the business of, selling digital products, or you're affiliate marketers and you're creating a course on affiliate marketing and stuff in your business, and you're like, yeah, I do want to hire some people, but also you're going to have to create, not that you need to necessarily be compliant in this situation, but you're losing out on opportunities to reach a wider range of an audience if you don't have a transcription. So for the hearing impaired, it's really important. And this really simplifies the process. And yes, I know there's a lot of people out there who may already say, well, YouTube does that automatically, and there's some AIs that will transcript automatically. Yes, that is true. But at the same time, Google, even and of itself, and including YouTube, because YouTube is owned by Google, prefers you to upload your own transcription, not use the automatic transcription. And if you're using something like Kajabi or ClickFunnels or Experientify or any of those other LMSs, ostensibly, then you're going to want to have a transcription ready to include in that. And this is the next step inside of Descript that will do that automatically for you in real time, actually. So it's pretty quick. It's pretty fast. It's a great tool. And even if you don't care about the transcriptions, well, the value and benefit of it is that you're going to be able to record for as long as you want, no transcription, but you don't have to ever have a subscription. So it's free, and it's not that much more to actually get the transcription too.
Well, and going back to creating the systems and processes, right? Like, in order to create systems and processes, you have to identify those, but then you have to document those and create training manuals, right? And so, what we found to be really helpful is using Descript, because you're going to create, video tutorials, and then it already creates a transcription. So then you take that transcription, you hand it off to, you hire a VA for the sole purpose of taking your transcription and cleaning it up into a step-by-step guide that goes alongside of the video tutorial. And so now you have a full training curriculum for your whatever systems and processes you're trying to implement. So
100%. Because I don't know about you, and by you, I mean those of you who are tuning in, but it always feels overwhelming to approach a process, even if I'm really good at it, and then say, I need to create an SOP out of this. It is, and it can be, but it's a lot easier when you visualize it. And what better visualization rather than screenshots and words, which of course can be created later for those who prefer that method, than actually just recording it. Hey, this is how you do the thing. This is how you do it. Here's a screen recording of it. So we also do that to communicate some things with clients and with other investors, right? And with software platforms that we use that we're, speaking to the dev team and stuff, we'll just record an issue and we'll say, hey, we're experiencing this problem. A lot of times they'll recommend Loom, but again, the difference between Loom and Descript, we'll go with Descript every time. So all that to say, yes, with an SOP system. So the next thing that I'm going to cover, like I said, is defining your company culture. And I know we might kind of scoff at this and say, well, I, don't really care about that. Here's why you actually should care about it, is because it creates a culture of longevity of your employees in your business, and then you hire the right people that's a good fit for your culture. And not only do you want to communicate that in your job description to begin with and give some insight in that, but you also want to transition and have that translated into the interviews that you offer. So you want to talk about your company culture, what you guys believe in terms of, what your values are, right? And you want to find people who align with those values and vision for your company. Here's an example of that, right? A lot of people in business have said, well, the customer is always right. Okay, Chris, why is that not true? It's not the case.
Yeah. So you want the customer to feel like they're always right. right? And they're the most important. But the reality is your team members, your employees should be the most important thing, right? If you make your team members and your employees feel more valued than anybody else, by definition, they will make the customers and the clients and the sellers and the people that you're working with and you're trying to help solve their problems, they will make them feel like they are the most important people in the world. And so it's that trickle down effect, right? Oftentimes, most businesses that I've ever been involved in where they lived by the motto, the customer was always right, the employee and the team member was secondary and substandard. And, oftentimes they would do things for the benefit of the client at the expense of the employee, not realizing that what that's doing is it's creating a negative culture to where that employee is going to feel resentment because it's like, hey, I've spent 3 years here. How do you not trust what I'm doing and the things that you've trained me to do? And my experience in the role, and you're going to take this person, who's just pissed off for some, random reason, and you're just going to take their word over mine. Right. And not saying that, hey, employees can't be wrong, but I think if you do it the right way and you empower your team and you make them feel like they're the most important person in the world, they're just going to make the clients feel like the most important person in the world and serve them at a higher level.
Right, exactly. And Richard Branson said it this way, and pretty to the point. Clients don't come first, employees come first. If you take care of your employees, they will take care of your clients, right?
There you go.
So paychecks can't buy loyalty that lasts. How valued your employees feel is how valued your customers will feel. So all that said, just leading into the company culture, defining that. And we define that in the interview too. And that part of it's also defined in the way in which you determine you'll provide benefits. And you may say, well, if I'm hiring overseas, what kind of benefits are we going to be able to provide? There are a lot. And here's the deal. I'm not going to get into all the details of that because we have a lot to cover. But what I will say is, again, linked in the description below is an affiliate link to our preferred place, onlinejobs.ph. So if you want to support the channel, if you agree with us that you should hire overseas first and in the Philippines in particular, then click that link, sign up, and then continue to follow along with our channel because we'll put out some free content, a very in-depth course about the employee hiring system made easy, virtual assistant edition, in addition to the in-house team edition, which is what we're working on right now. But one of the reasons we wanted to just provide this as an opportunity to talk about this is because we want anybody who's following along and says that, this is a value to them to be prepared to start hiring people correctly to scale their business, right? And you just have to kind of broach the topic with just a level of interest that you guys might have. So continue to comment below with any questions that you have about it. Since I haven't clicked record on the actual system yet, because I happen to be the one doing the employee hiring system, then any of your questions will get answered in there. So if I hadn't already covered it or planned on covering it, then we're going to go into that. But just as a quick aside, those benefits that you can provide, if you're looking at onlinejobs.ph, you got Phil Health and SSS. There's something called the 13th month, and you want to be aware of that. And there's also different types of PTO. And again, we're not going to get into all of those, but the why behind it is just what Chris said, right? You're taking care of your employees, then they're going to take care of your clients, whether they're a cold caller or whether they're, an SMS sales rep, or whether they're another one of the critical roles. And I never even mentioned when I started this saying there's 4 of them, lead manager. No matter what business you're in, you're going to have to manage leads, whatever a lead is to you in your business. So from an executive assistant to these other 3 roles, I would also recommend that you train and equip your executive assistant to follow what we do and what we'll talk more length about later, a 2-stage interview minimum process. And that first interview, you should train and equip your EA to actually interview the first one so that you can spend more time working on your business. And if you have to, in your business, so you can develop the systems to be scaling your business rather than just, 80 hours a week. So is there anything else that you think I should cover as far as that goes, the where to find them, Brad? Because that was your piece to this, asking where.
No, that was great. Yeah, I just wanted, I mean, our channel, guys, if you haven't noticed already, is not necessarily just like theory of, real estate investing. We are really cognizant of making sure the content is actionable and you can use it, right. You can use this today. What we're talking about right now is something that you can do today. So nothing to add, except that, in addition to questions, guys, like if you guys have started this process already or have done any type of training before or hiring with VAs, if you have any experience, we'd like to hear about it. Put it in the comments.
Yeah.
Did you guys have a good experience? Did you not have? I'm curious to see if you've thought about this or if you haven't, so just want to hear your guys' thoughts on hiring and domestic, hiring VAs. If you had experience, if you thought about it, if if you guys are getting any value out of it. So please let us know.
Gotcha. Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for that. There's a couple more points to cover. Posting, right? We talked about, but also filtering candidates. We have a filtering system that you're absolutely going to want to stick around for because it will change the way in which you actually vet candidates, and it's largely automated. So we'll talk about what that looks like briefly. We have about 10 minutes left. Again, send your questions in if you want. So from there, it's offering interviews. And then after offering interviews, we have some tips for conducting either interview and following up with candidates. And I'll run through this just as an overview for you all right now. So filtering candidates, I'd recommend this in two ways. We have the two-stage interview process that we talked about very briefly. One that your EA will take over, and then based off of your descriptions and all of the previous stuff we talked about that makes sense for a good fit for your company, your EA should know that. And then the second interview, if they are going to be given a second interview, you want to be on, right? Or a manager that eventually you hire as you continue to repeat this system that we're talking about to scale your team and scale your business. And then you want to filter those candidates before that interview. And what does that look like? So using templates and autoresponders, we use Gmail. Gmail, you can actually automatically auto respond to any type of message that comes in that you want to set. So from the beginning, once you create your job description, be sure to put some hoops in there for them to jump through. In particular, what we'll do is we'll post a job on onlinejobs.ph, and then we'll go through this, everything that we talked about. And at the very bottom or somewhere close to the bottom, we'll say, we will not be responding to anybody who is using the onlinejobs.ph inbox. To apply, send your resume via email to the following email address and make the title exactly X, Y, and Z, whatever it is. So then they have to do that. And if they fail to do that, then they're automatically out, because they didn't read the whole job post. But we do give them a little bit of grace too, because at the beginning in all capital letters, we say, please read this in its entirety. So it's not like we're trying to, because I know a lot of VAs will just go through, and maybe they even have other VAs or bots or whatever, just looking through job titles and then click apply, and they'll copy and paste just a message template that they have for jobs like that, saying, oh, I read your job description and I think I'm a perfect fit. Well, they didn't read it. They didn't. And it's obvious they didn't read it. So we wanted to filter out candidates who actually, if they're going to show up to even applying that way, how great are they going to be showing up to work every day if you actually end up hiring them and you miss that part? They're not.
Yeah.
So,
hey, one thing to note, buyer beware. There are literally VAs out there where they've created a business because they're good at interviewing, right? Where they will just apply to jobs for people and interview. And then the VA that actually ends up starting to work for you is a different person. So it's very, very important that when you're going through your interview process, you're requiring them to be on camera, right? Do not, it's fine to make an exception for the first interview, but one of the two interviews, they have to be on camera. So you can confirm when they actually start working for you. And we make it a point where, hey, every meeting that we do, you have to be on camera. And that's a pet peeve of mine. If you're an investor and you're in these networking groups and you're on these Zoom meetings, I constantly see just gray squares with names, gray squares with names. Like, you don't want to be a gray square with a name, because I'm not going to remember you. Christian's not going to remember you unless you've got a cool name, like Brad Garcia or Chris Closes Your Deal, like it's not going to be memorable.
What
right?
about Christian Weatherspoon?
Well, yeah, Christian Weatherspoon is, yeah. It might not, it might fill up.
That's the best one, actually.
Yeah, that is probably the best one. But yeah, like, nobody's going to remember you. And so, you're not going to build relationships. You want to be a person that you're creating relationships with, and that overflows into what you're doing with running your team, right? So when you're running Zoom meetings and trainings with your team, you should be on camera and your team members should be on camera, so you can build that connection and that relationship with them. And again, at the end of the day, right, nonverbal communication is like 70+% of the communication that we, interpret and receive. And so it's really important, because you can identify, whether somebody's tracking with you as you're like teaching them or coaching them on something, right? You can see, like the way that their eyes are looking. If you're teaching somebody something and they're like squinting, that's probably not a sign that they're like super like caught up with exactly what you're talking about.
Which
right?
would be a
It's
good
either
time to interject and say, do you have any questions? Right? If you see
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, exactly. They're either confused or they forgot their glasses and they can't see the screen, one or the other, right? So, like, there's things that you want to,
or you got something on your
yeah,
face.
it's really important.
Awesome, man. Thanks for bringing that up. And just for my part in that, for benefit of everyone watching, to get around that, you need to ask the question, are you the one that's actually going to be doing the work? It might sound like a weird question, even if they are on camera and they're showing up and everything. Ask them, are you the one who's doing the work, or do you have a team that you outsource this to? So be sure you do that. That's another part of the vetting process once you get to the interview. But of course, with those autoresponders, those emails, it works when you put that little hoop, as I call it, to jump through, where it says make the title exactly XYZ. So then you can go to Gmail and you can set up a template that will automatically respond to all messages with the title subject, right? XYZ. I'm your top choice. And then we also ask them to explain also why you're the best fit for the role. And then we'll have an automatic email go out in the way that I described. And then it'll ask 3 critical questions, especially because we're hiring from the Philippines. It'll say, we're working on this time zone, whatever, if we work on Pacific all the way to Eastern and everything in between. Is that okay with you? Right? And then we say, this is an opportunity for full-time work, but it's going to start off with part-time. And then there's a 90-day probationary period where then we will pay PhilHealth and SSS as a benefit. Is part-time work to start okay with you? We have to have them respond to these. And then another thing that we'll put in the third question is, we don't want to go back and forth and negotiate about price. We just need to know what you need per hour to make this role a good fit, to make sure we're a good fit to work together, in so many words. So then please answer that. So if they don't respond and answer those 3 questions, we have some grace for that, but we'll respond automatically with that inside of the, hey, thanks for applying. We really appreciate it. We have a really large amount of interest in this. So this is an automated message. We even say it. We don't try to hide that or anything. In the meantime, to expedite this process so we can potentially offer you an interview, answer these questions. And I've shared what those questions are. So that's part of the autoresponders and the templates inside of Gmail. Since we're using Gmail, it could work for other ones. I'm not sure though, because I don't use it, that I would recommend for you to do. And then you just need to understand managing proper and improper submissions. If they're refusing to give those answers, then on to the next one. If they're not communicating clearly and it's a role for copywriting or something like that, where they're actually going to have to create, even if they're using ChatGPT, you still have to evaluate whether or not it makes sense, the words that ChatGPT strung together. So you're going to need somebody who understands English in written form. But if it's for like a cold calling, then you're going to want to ask for a voice recording in those 3 question sets. So understand that for each role, it's completely Some of them are the same, but it is different, each of those question sets that we ask. So consider what's most important to you, change those questions to match what your business is, create the automations to further vet candidates automatically, because you might get 200-300 people who, quote, apply. Half of them will go into the onlinejobs.ph or Upwork or whatever you're using. And the other half, they're going to actually apply the way that you asked them to, but they might not get the title right. So they didn't really read it clearly. They didn't follow instructions. And in your mind, you can say, okay, that could potentially be a strike against them. They may be a great person that you would be best friends with and want to get a cup of coffee, but they're not a good fit for the role, especially if it involves keen attention to detail. So we're close to closing, and I want to fulfill on a promise that I made from the beginning and tell you the first hire that we made. The first hire that I made was a copywriter from Nigeria. And he was a great copywriter. This was 10 years ago, before ChatGPT. And I began to develop what the system was in its infancy, completely different from this, but ultimately where this is based out of. And it's actually more than 10 years ago. It was a long time ago. It's 15. But anyway, and then when we linked up, the first person we hired was an outreach specialist to get a massive list of realtors and start building relationships so they could bring us pocket listings and deals. So consider that no matter what your hire is, following this same system will only benefit you. So if this is something that appeals to you, let us know. Say I'm in the comment section, so that when we do roll out with the free course that's going to be on a playlist inside of YouTube, we'll share it. We'll link it. We'll reply to your comment with the link, but also hit the notification bell and subscribe to the channel so that you can see that, right? And know and get notified when it comes available. So, I mean, that's pretty much it, other than I did say I'd get into tips for conducting the interviews and stuff. That's got to be another live altogether, because there's so many of them that we could go through. And of course, we talked about some keys to consider before posting the job ad. So I hope that this was valuable for you. Again, let us know that, because the content we develop is dictated by you, because we want to provide what's going to be valuable for you, the person watching. So we appreciate you so much. You guys have a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful day. And unless you got closing remarks, right? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, this is great. I think there's going to be a lot of value. And again, as Christian mentioned, we're going to be putting out, a whole course on our process where we have virtually no turnover. I mean, we've maintained, above a 90% retention rate with our VAs. And one little key thing that I'll mention is that we've actually had the bulk of our VAs right now, ever since we did our initial job postings, most of our VAs as of now and continuing forward are referrals of our existing team members. So we'll talk about all about how you can create a system where your VAs are getting more VAs hired for your team and making your job that much easier, right? Because that's what we do here, is just make your life easier in your investing business.
Yeah, that's a really good point. If you have those questions, and we're still live, drop them live, we'll answer them live. If you have those questions later, then as you're watching it, just leave them in the description. We literally make a point to have Feedback Fridays where we answer all the questions live, and we try to make every single question, answered in the best way possible. So just let us know. And then next time we'll talk more about why we're hiring, where we're hiring. We have an employee management system. We're going to talk about how to manage employees. But if you're just popping on now, sorry, we're ending this. You guys be blessed. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you next time.